Welcome to the Real Estate Investment Nomad podcast. I am your host, Nathaly Salas, an international real estate expert. Join me as we explore the thrilling world of global real estate. We'll uncover diverse international markets, backed by solid data and engaging insights. Each episode features expert guests from the hottest markets, providing you with the knowledge to invest wisely and successfully. Whether you are a local realtor aiming to go global or an investor curious about international opportunities, this is the podcast for you. Get ready to transform your approach and achieve global real estate success to become a real estate investment nomad. Hi, everybody. I'm Nathaly Salas. We are in the Real Estate Investment Nomad podcast. This is our first episode, and we're super excited to introduce our first guest and friend, Sally Pederson. Just to give you a little background, I want to give you a few fun facts from her and how we became friends online. We haven't met in person yet, but we align on almost every value, I feel, that has to do with international living. And just to give you some information, Sally has lived in 5 countries, traveled to over 45 countries, and you have multiple residencies, also citizenships, and you have legally reduced your taxes to the single digits, which is pretty awesome. I want to hear more about that. You own companies in multiple countries as well as bank accounts. So I want to introduce you, Sally, because I think your lifestyle that we see through Instagram and online is amazing. So just give us all the secrets. How do you come behind this? You're from Canada and you decided to just leave Canada and live the life around the world. Will you give us a little background on how everything started?
Well, first, thank you so much, Nathaly, for having me here today. I'm excited to be your first guest. It is great. And yeah, so basically what I do with my company called Global Citizen Life is the lifestyle I've been living for over a decade. And I didn't get into it thinking that I was going to turn it into a business. I was just kind of fed up with things, and life happens and we go through trauma and turmoil and things like that in Canada. But even prior to that, back when I was in high school, so probably about 15 years old, it was Canada. It was probably winter. It was cold, and I hate the cold. And I remember saying to my friends back then, I said, I think I've been switched at birth. And they were like, what? Your parents aren't your parents? And I said, no, not literally. I just said, there's just this feeling in me, like I'm not supposed to be living in Canada for my entire life. And then I just thought I'm just being a crazy teenager or whatever. And fast forward many, many years later, and again, a series of events happened, and I just had kind of the opportunity, and I just, you know what, I'm going to go. I'm going to leave. I had a house in Costa Rica at the time that was going to be my retirement home. I was thinking, buy it now, so I'm paying off the mortgage in the future. By that time, it'll be done, and I'll retire and go down there. But life happens, and things don't always work out that way. And so I ended up moving there sooner with my 13-year-old daughter. So I do have experience with leaving with teenagers as well. And that's just how my journey began. And then, yeah, it went from one country to another. And as I was moving from country to country, I started learning more about international real estate, taxes, businesses, corporations, and everything else. And then it wasn't until the pandemic was when I decided to make it a business. Prior to that, people would ask me questions and I would give them the information that I knew. But that kind of turning point to make it a business was when the Canadian government threatened not to give citizens their passport because they were protesting, and froze people's bank accounts because they were protesting. And I just thought, whether I agree or disagree with the protest, to me, that's a side point. But I was like, how dare they threaten us with our money and our right to a passport because we're protesting what they're saying. We have the right to do that. And then that's when I really decided, I said, okay, people really need to know the type of options they have and the things that are available. And it's not just designed for the millionaires and the billionaires. It is for everybody, and we can do it. But our schools aren't teaching us. They're never going to. The government doesn't want us because they want to keep their claws in us and make sure that they control us.
No, that's crazy. I didn't know that they will hold the passports. I knew that they closed the borders. I mean, that's big.
They were called, so it was basically people who didn't want to get vaccinated, and they were called terrorists, and they were horrible people, and they were like the scum of the earth. And I think they actually said those words. And they said, you know what, if you're going to protest, we're going to freeze your bank accounts. And if you protest and you don't, like, we're not going to give you your passport. We're not going to renew it. You won't get it. And I just thought, what kind of dictatorship and tyranny is that, to say, if I protest what you're doing because I don't agree, which I have a right to do, and you're going to freeze my bank account? You're going to make me stay trapped within the country because I can't travel without a passport? Like, that's not right. Then that's not fair within any country. But I thought Canada, all countries, to do this. I thought if Canada's going to do that or threatening to do that, every other country in the world has the potential to do the same.
Yeah, because sometimes we think that's reserved for Asia, or China is restrictive, and you're like, oh, they're restricted and controlled by the government. And then the pandemic happened, you're like, wait, we're in the same isn't like the same thing happening over here right now? You open your eyes into what really is behind the scenes, that we think we're free, but there's this puppet show behind in the background that we don't realize, because we're like, well, we're freer than China, but that doesn't mean that we're fully free.
That's right.
So you started your journey before the pandemic, traveling and everything. How was living in other countries? You were ready to leave the country if this happened to you. I'm sure you had your passport ready. You didn't have to wait for a passport. So how did, living in another country, or if you did before, how was that change of perspective? You saw a way out really quickly? Because some people are stuck in the country and they're like, well, if I don't have a passport, it's going to take me 3 months. And then until I get a red permit somewhere or a home somewhere, it's going to be 6, 8, 10 months. And when it can be so quickly as you get a flight and you get out, right? How was that difference?
Right. Well, and that's where preparing is very important, because you're not just going to get a passport overnight. And, if you can get it through citizenship, so your parents were born somewhere and you can get it, that still takes time to do. It can still take months. And so we always say to people, it's better to prepare and plan even years in advance than wait, because those rules also change. We've seen it recently with their citizenship by investment programs in the Caribbean islands. And a couple of them went from $100,000 to donate. It's basically you buy a passport, but they don't like to use those words. But you make a donation and you get the passport. Well, they've just doubled it now to 200,000. So if somebody would have got in 6 months ago, they would have only paid 100,000, and now they're paying 200,000. So the cost is going to be more. And depending upon the requirements, those things change as well. And so it is very important, because then once you have it, you're not stuck under the control of any one single government. Even through the pandemic, I was able to travel because I had citizenship and residency. Like, I'm a citizen, I can go to this country. I'm a permanent resident, I can go to this country. And I was still able to do some travel. Now, I didn't do a lot because obviously there was a pandemic going on, but I still did travel. And so people need to think of the future, right? Some people say, oh, things aren't bad enough yet. Yeah. Well, when things get bad enough, it might be too late, or you are stuck for X amount of time, depending upon where you're going. Or there's the option, yes, you can go somewhere and stay maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months, depending upon what your tourist visa allows you to do, like to travel as a tourist. And then what? And then you're moving again in 3 months, and then moving again in 3 months. And then how applying for a citizenship, it's like, well, where are you? It's like, well, I'm here. Oh, no, now I'm in this country. Oh, no, now I'm in this country. And then again, it makes things a lot harder and a lot more complicated.
Yeah, I think that preparing just in case will be very helpful. We didn't know until the pandemic happened that they can restrict certain rights that were very basic. Americans here, it happened the same. We're locked. We cannot go anywhere. But if you had a passport from a different country, you can go.
That's right. So that's right. As you say, the quote, wherever your home is. And I enjoy having multiple homes. My goal is 4. I think 4 homes in 4 different countries is the ideal for me. But I know for many people, they think that's crazy. They think just having one other, and that's great. Whatever works for you. And that's the thing too, is there's no kind of one size fits all. Nothing within being a global citizen is really black and white, because every person has what they want, what they desire, what they're looking for, their goal, their plan, their end game. What is their I don't want to use the word ideal because maybe ideal, but there's no perfect place in the world. There's no absolute perfect plan. Everything has a bit of give and take to it. Designing what works best for that person is great. And my lifestyle, I know for some people is not the best and they wouldn't want it, and that's okay.
Yeah, true. Because I'm surprised and glad that you actually, your Costa Rica home, you had that before the pandemic.
Yes.
What made you make the decision? Because you're in real estate. We love to understand the decision behind, like, you were thinking about it, you were fearful of it, you didn't understand. I'm not, do you speak Spanish or not? What was the that you're like,
Yes.
combined? I
So
don't care.
at that point, so this was probably back in about 2007, 2008. And living in Canada, it gets cold in the winter. And I was like, I want a vacation home. And at first I was thinking in Canada. And I was like, I'd like to kind of get out of the winter. And I thought, well, if I go into British Columbia, so still in Canada, I'm like, but then I can't get there in the winter because driving through the mountains, I mean, I could get there, but it's not going to be that easy. And then to get out of the snow because I have to go through the mountains, I'm driving 7, 8, 9, 10 or more hours. Well, that's ridiculous. I don't want to go that far. So then what if I look in the US? And I looked at that and I'm like, well, then I might as well just get on a plane. Where can I go? And I had never been to Costa Rica before. So I just started researching Costa Rica and I decided I needed to go on vacation. So my boyfriend at the time and I went on vacation and I said, while we're here, I want to look at some real estate. And he was like, what? Yeah, I've been looking online. I wouldn't mind looking. So we were there for a week. And on day 3, I put a deposit down on my house in Costa Rica. Now,
Wow.
I don't recommend people to do things the way that I do things. I do things crazy. Like I just like do it and figure it out and whatever. And there was definitely some challenges and some frustrating things, but it worked out. I learned a lot. Like there's no MLS system. We're like, what do you mean there's no MLS system? In North America, we have it, but a lot of other countries don't. And so we actually went to other real estate offices and said, okay, we'll be straight up. We're working with this company and this person, but this is what they said.
Mhm.
Like there is no MLS, or this is what they're showing us. And they said, yeah, that's the way it works. And if you see all these places in the window, if you're interested in any of these, we're more than happy to show you, but they won't show you any of these places.
Yeah.
And so that was quite interesting. And another one that was really crazy is when I bought my place in Montenegro, I sent the money to the owner. You don't send it to a lawyer or a notary, you send it directly. And I was sending a substantial amount of money to a woman who owned the property, but she lived in Russia. And now this was before the invasion and the war, not much before, but just before. And even then I had to jump because the bank's like, why are you sending money to Russia? Well, I'm buying a place in Montenegro. It's like, well, that's Montenegro. Why are you sending it to Russia? I'm like, because the owner lives there. And that was a whole learning experience, completely different again. So yeah, it's been interesting. Thankfully, though, everything has worked out. I ask a lot of people, ask a lot of questions, especially if it's, Costa Rica, we didn't know anybody. So we went to multiple, how does this work? What about this? And we were honest with them saying we are working with somebody. We don't want to mislead you,
Right.
but we don't know. We need to know because if this is not right, then obviously we're not going to work with that person. And we went through a reputable real estate agency and things like that as well. So it was an interesting and somewhat stressful process as well.
Yeah, I think it can be, especially if you're new to it and you only go on vacation, you decide to put a deposit. It happens a lot in Mexico for us. But I wish everybody had goodwill when people like that are making decisions. Because of that, many local agencies take advantage of that and they're like fishing for people to just be like, hey, you just give me your money, deposit here, otherwise you're gonna lose the unit. We only have 2 left. Generate this sense of urgency. Of course, we're only marketing. We understand how to do it, but just doing it to somebody with an investment in a different country they don't understand, it's a little cruel and it happens every day. So yeah, I think you and I get along because we're like crazy. Well, I just want to go. I'm just gonna maybe buy it, and I don't care what happens, but I'll deal with it later. And then research that you can take those risks because you're not gonna do it blindly. Nobody should. But having that intuition that is like, I think I'm in the right place. I feel right here, and you do your research, because that's good for us too. Because there are many agents out there. You just ask more than 1 or 2, and attorneys to make sure that they have
Absolutely.
cross the different stories and you kind of find the common ground, an informed decision.
And one thing too that I find for me anyway, and it's not even just with real estate, it's even like the basics of an online course. And I get the part of marketing like buy now, there's only so many. If I'm not feeling that, yes, I'm going to do it 100% all in, I would rather spend more money later and be happier instead of being pressured and then be like, oh, maybe it wasn't the right choice. And then I can't get out of it, or I lose my money, or it's not right. And also, even if it's truthful, there's only 2 units left, whatever, there's a part of me that thinks, then you know what? If it's not available when I'm ready, it's not meant to be. There will be another one. And I think it's a great thing to follow because, yeah, in real estate, sometimes there's markets that are super hot, right? And things are going fast and moving quickly. But then you really have to know that, and you really need to know also, why are you buying?
Yeah.
What is the long-term goal? What is the plan? Are you buying because you need a home to live in and you are going to relocate? Then you want to make sure it's the right home. Are you buying just for rental? And then, you know what? Then it's just numbers. Do
Hmm.
the numbers work? Then the location, the numbers, do the numbers work? Take oh, it's beautiful, it's nice. That doesn't matter. It's a rental.
Yeah.
You have to take that emotion away. Or is it the combination of both? I'm going to use it certain times a year and then it's going to be a rental. But be aware that some people don't treat rentals as good as you treat your place, even though it's a rental. And you have to be aware for things to get broken and ruined and spilt. And accidents just generally happen. And on that too, which we will probably talk a little bit about later, is if you are going to rent it, how are you going to rent it? Airbnb is very popular, but there's a lot of countries now that are not renewing or allowing for new Airbnbs. So you got to think, if I'm going, is it a secure investment? And what is my end goal? What is my long-term plan with it?
Hmm. Yeah, because when I first landed in Mexico to buy, because going on vacation is a different mindset. When you
Absolutely.
everything is shine and it's beautiful, and then when you live in the city, then you're like, oh my god, traffic is slow. The city takes forever to just charge me for this. I have to go in person to pay for the water. What do you mean I have to go in person? What happened with online? And then if you don't have somebody there, you're going to be behind on your water bill. Let's say
Yeah, they'll cut it off.
you cut it off, and then what happens? Well, you need a property manager to go there in
Mhm.
person. You have to pay that person. You have to trust that person, and then to make sure they don't rent the place when you're not there. It happens all the.
Right?
That's why we try
Mhm.
to, for the most part, cover those risks that are not taken care of. And exactly what you said. I mean, why are you buying? That's the question number one. I think I will ask myself.
Mhm.
And number two, what's the long-term plan? Because if it's just for rental purposes, yeah, absolutely. Some people ask me, but if they want everything in one location, probably it's going to be hard to keep within a budget, right? I
Right.
can,
Oh, yeah.
oh,
It doesn't exist.
yes,
All the wants and the budget
yeah,
and it doesn't matter. Even if you get into places where people are spending hundreds of thousands, even close to 1 million, there's still things that people with those budgets, there's still a bit of a give and take. Nobody's getting absolutely everything that they want within the budget. Or I shouldn't say nobody, but only a handful, because all the things that we want are generally not in the budget that we
mhm,
want.
yeah.
And that's life.
Yeah, there is something for everybody, but the intention, I think, is super important to have that clear. That's why every time
Mm-hmm.
a client we ask them, is it for lifestyle purposes or for investment? Because if it's for investment, don't buy the most expensive furniture. It's gonna get scratched, misplaced, broken. It works the same in many countries, right? Like in the US and Canada, probably they cover with insurance anything that can happen in the unit. I know that in Mexico, there's no insurance from Airbnb. If somebody broke something in that home, Airbnb does not cover it. And the owner has to take care of those expenses, either with additional insurance or with their own budget. So I think it's super important to have those things in mind as they're buying also and as they're buying the furniture and all the elements. So
Absolutely.
based on your experience, because you did it yourself, and then you're like, I'm just gonna research, I wanna do it. And now you're offering it as a service. So
Mm.
can you share with us a little more information about, let's say I'm a new client, I wanna work with you, and I'm curious to know, where do I start? Do I start through the residency process, the buying process, the legal, become a resident? Do I live there and rent it for a while and see how it feels like? What will be the service that you will be able to provide for them?
Well, it depends, right? So it kind of depends. ultimately, let's start with, have you been there before? I hope so, unless you're like me and not necessarily. But so if you have not been there before, absolutely, I always recommend renting. Unless it's buying, again, it's going to be a rental property and you've done a lot of research and you know this area is good and it's rental, then you don't have to be there because it's strictly investment, strictly rental, then it doesn't really matter. But as you said, it's different eyes when you're on vacation and when you're living somewhere. I love Italy and
Mhm.
I'm trying really hard not to ever live there because I don't want to ruin it. I don't want to see the flaws and the problems. And I have so many Italian friends that are like, don't ever move to Italy because it's different eyes. So the
Mhm.
first thing is, what is, again, back to your long-term goal? And then also, are you paying cash for it? Do you need a mortgage? And then depending if you need a mortgage and you do plan on living there, even if it's part-time, then maybe we need to get you residency because in some countries you need to have residency or you can't get a mortgage. Some countries you can get a mortgage and they will give it to foreigners because they have that asset of the property for the mortgage. So that would be another consideration, how much time you're going to spend there or not. So again, it just comes down to what's your goal is the first part. And then the second would be, do you want residency or citizenship there? Or is it just kind of an easy place to get residency and it's a back pocket or a citizenship one? So say Turkey, for example. Somebody says, oh, Turkey, it's good investment. I might use it occasionally. I wouldn't mind getting citizenship because it's a great addition to my citizenship that I have. And so then we're looking at least 400,000 euro plus for a property. So do you have that cash? And we can go in, pay cash, apply for that citizenship based on your investment. Great, you rent it out. Simple. It takes time, obviously, but that would be the basic process. But if it's another one where you're going to want to live, then we might want to look at getting that residency status first, depending upon the country, because then that may open up options for other places. So maybe without residency, you can buy a condo, but with residency, you can buy a house with land. And there are some countries that have certain rules as to who can own what. So
Mhm.
then we would look at country specific as well as what you want. So it's not fully like this is step one, this is step two, this is step three, because it's more of a web of what people want, where they're looking at, what it's going to be used for. And then, if it's rental as investment, then we want to look at tax implications.
Mhm.
Right.
Yes.
So you're renting, you're probably going to have to be filing and paying tax within the country, and there's going to be a cost for that. And then also, as you're paying yourself, then that's income. So depending upon where you're living, that's income from you. Or are you going to purchase the property in an offshore corporation? And so then the funds go to that company and maybe not to you because you don't need the income from it. And it just builds up, and that company is in a no tax or low tax jurisdiction. And so you're only paying those kind of local rental taxes that are a requirement by the local government. And
Mhm.
so that's again another aspect, but depending upon what
It's like
their long-term plan is. So it's a web. It really is.
egg and the chicken, right? What comes first?
Ex-
You vary by what you want and where you want it and by when. So that's a good thing because then if they talk to you, you can guide them through what's your priority number one, money, time, and then long-term plan, which makes sense
That's
because I mean there's no like a one size fits all. I know
no.
that when I was talking to our team in Portugal, they were saying that, for example, properties that, let's say, I don't know the golden visa, how much it used to be, let's say 500,000, maybe it was less.
That's yeah.
They were going to visit homes when realtors were taking clients to visit homes that were like, let's say, in the 300,000. And they wanted to get the golden visa. So then they will up the price to match that criteria of the requirement for the visa, although the house was listed for 300,000. So people were not knowing or not knowing, buying something that was 300 for 500,000 euros just to match the golden visa, and that money was wasted.
Yeah.
So I was like, is that even possible? And I think there is some case studies that show that's why it's super important to trust your realtor.
It is. And some situations like that, and I've heard of it too, and some people were just scammed and they didn't realize that they were paying more, that they should have been getting something better for it. And then there were others that just said, I don't care. Just give me, this is what I have to spend. I want the visa. I don't care.
Mhm.
And still, I guess they just had the cash and they just don't care.
Yeah.
But most times, even yeah, and it was 500,000. And Spain right now is 500,000. They're talking about getting rid of it,
Heard of
and
that.
they're or raising it to 1 million.
Whoa.
So if anybody, and that's what I mean, it's better to go now. But then when you're looking, you want to make sure it's okay. I'm looking at this property. Is it really worth 500,000? Right? Because there's some when they know that's what it's about, then even if it's worth like 425, 450, they'll bump it up to 500.
Mhm.
Right. So in those cases, I think sometimes you want to look if you can afford it a little over like the $600,000 mark, because then you're more in the actual value of what you're getting. When you're in that between that 4 and 5, you got to be careful because they just might bump it up
Mhm.
and you're paying more and getting less because of that residency. But if you want to go to Spain, there's other options. And the golden visa program, in my opinion, is not the best way.
Yeah. I
But
you buy 2 or 3 houses at that point, depending where.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
So that's great information because I know the more we learn broadly on the real estate space for other countries, I'm like surprised if I thought we had it bad in Mexico on the compliance part of things. But it just, in Spanish we say, se cocen habas en todos lados, meaning everybody burns their lentil, kind of, everybody has their
Mm,
hiding somewhere.
yeah.
But we don't know until we're there and we don't know until we talk to the locals. So yeah, a lot of learning for clients. And that's why I think it's super important to have somebody holding their hand, somebody like you as a consultant that you just have the best interest for them instead of the other side of the sales side that they just want to have a commission. And I mean, the higher the better.
And that's right. And that's one thing to look for me, not to sound bad, but I don't care where you live. I don't care where you want citizenship. I don't care where you want residency. I don't care what country you incorporate with. I will give you all of the options and I reduce it just so with a client, when they come on, they fill out a big long form and answer a whole bunch of questions. So I get to know them and we go through it. And then we talk about it and I give them a document. And it's like, so for your company and what you do, these we figure are the best three options for you for where to incorporate. Or even if it's real estate, what country you should have your real estate in. And these, for citizenship or residency, these three options are good. And these three options, and I always give options because for me, it doesn't matter. I'm not somebody who's, like in Montenegro, I'm not like, oh, I'm just selling you Montenegro.
Mhm.
Montenegro's great, just everything, because it's about diversifying. It's about what's best for that person. It doesn't matter to me, but we want to do what's best for them.
Mhm.
Sometimes people really have to sit and think about like, what do I want?
Exactly.
A lot of times I don't want winter. I know what I did not want,
Yeah.
but even just taking out winter, sure, it knocks out a few countries, but there's still a lot of countries left.
Yeah.
And so we really have to think of what is the reason that we're doing this. Is it in sure investment purposes? Great. Then we're going to look at things strategically one way. Is it that middle of the road personal investment? We look at things that way. We're moving, we're relocating, we're kind of maybe cutting all ties, renouncing US citizenship. Like we're done. We don't want to continue paying taxes there for the rest of our life. And we're moving. And it's like, okay, well, then we need to look at this in that perspective.
Mhm. In that perspective that you just mentioned, will you share with us a few success stories that you think your clients, because I see a lot of good reviews on your website, and I'm sure people are grateful to understand a little more beyond the obvious or beyond what Google can tell you, because Google can just say so much, it can just give you so much, but unless you experiment it and live it, which is very much on practice, you cannot read in a book. What would you think that your clients that gives you praise you the most? Let's say, thanks for telling me this because it saved me this amount, or thanks for rerouting me to a different company of the real estate company because they were upselling me on things. Like, was there anything that stands out to you that your clients tell you? What's
Well,
the
there was one that we were doing the kind of the whole broad change of stuff. He was paying high taxes in the US and wanting to relocate, and he really wanted to lower it. But when he was looking online, he says like his wife wanted to move to Europe. And there's a lot of places in Europe that they're just not low taxes, right?
Mhm.
That personal tax is not low. And he's like, I want to be saving taxes, not kind of equal to where I am. And through looking at stuff, and we found that in Italy, they have a flat tax of 100,000 euro. And so for him, he was like, 100,000 euro. Like, that's saving me a lot of money because he was paying substantially more than that. So then his wife was like, I could live in Italy. Italy's great. We love Italy. And so moving there, we introduced them to a few different real estate agents because not everybody gets along. I'm not the only one in my industry who does what I do. Some people like me, some people don't. I don't know why. What's not to like? But I'm just kidding. But some people just resonate more with other people.
It's an energy.
And they just understand them more. It's just that energy. And so what we try to do is try to introduce them to at least two, like one, if we know them, we can be like, oh yeah, you'll definitely get along with this realtor, this mortgage broker if they need that. But with them, it was just a realtor because they were able to buy, and they brought them around and they found a place that they absolutely loved. And I think she loved it more than him, but he was like, if my wife is happy, I'm happy. I'm saving money. I'm
Yeah.
saving a lot of flat tax now for several years, and they're enjoying it. And they've got almost everything that they wanted from that situation. And there is a way, and some people I know that are saying, well, it's 100,000 euro in taxes. Like, that's a lot. And everything is perspective. Yeah, it's a lot if you're only paying, 10, 20,000 right now, then 100 is a lot. You're not going to go to pay more. But when you're paying substantially more, it's reducing it. And so sometimes we need to also look at the cost of living. Where do you want to be? So when buying real estate, sometimes it's not just the real estate, it's also that cost of living. And where do you want to be? Like Montenegro, part of me loves Montenegro. I have property there and it's beautiful, but it's very small and I get bored. And that's part of the reason why I multiple places for me, because I love my place there. It's all my stuff. I do not rent it out because to me, the market isn't worth me renting it out. As we talked about, things can get broken, damaged, and to replace a leather couch, it's just not worth it. Although when I go back, it's going to be dusty, but that's fine. I'm okay with that. But I do get bored with it because it is small town. There is no Amazon Prime. So for anybody who needs Amazon Prime, and I'm not a shopper, so great, don't need it, don't care. But then I also get bored after about 3-ish months. And I'm like, okay, I'm starting to get bored. I need more to do. And then it's great. Like I'll go back to Barcelona or whatever travel plans and things that I have. And every time when I travel, I say my life is a working vacation because I'm always looking at real estate. I'm always meeting people and checking it out. And so it's meeting the right people and introducing them to the right agents to help them find that place, whether if it's in places I've been, I connect people to who I know. So a friend of mine, it wasn't work related, but a friend of mine being in Montenegro, she's like, I'm in Montenegro a fair amount. She works on a boat, a yacht. So it's not just a boat, it's a big yacht. And they have a port there. And she said, like we do port there. So she's like, maybe if I had something, so when I'm there, I could use it, but more of a rental because I'm gone most of the time. And so I introduced her to my realtor, and she got a place in Porto Montenegro. And she's happy with that. And she was great. She was great because she's like, yeah, we dock there. I've been there, but I don't know. I don't know how it works. I don't know what goes on there and how things happen. So I always try to, with the countries I've lived in, my own personal people that I work with, my lawyer, my real estate, my person. And then outside of that, then it is through people who have a good reputation or people that I know who have worked with other people to get them what they want and need. And what I loved about my realtor, sorry, is I gave her my wish list, as we said earlier. There's the wants
Yeah.
and the price tag. And
Yeah.
I knew my wants and price tag were not going to line up. And what I loved about her is she stuck with the price tag.
Okay.
She's like, this is your price, this is your budget. And we found another place that was like on the high end of the budget. And then she said, yeah, but you have to finish the work. And some places don't come fully with kitchens. I'm sure you're aware. Sometimes the cabinets, not always, but most times no fridge, dishwasher, things like that. And she said, by the time you furnish, by the time you do this and you do this and you do this and you do this, she's like, is it in your budget? Like, it's not. And I like that because she's not the one like, oh, I want to make more commission. I don't care if you furnish it or sleep on the floor, and some are like that, unfortunately. And so it's just making sure that they're the right ones and they're happy. And people that I know have been very happy with their purchases and where they're at.
Yeah, and it helps that you're physically there, have tested the market, or have traveled to the country to understand. As you said, we're like working, vacation. We're always working. We're always on vacation. I feel like I'm always chilling. I chase the sun. So I'm here in Chicago because it's summer, but I'm
Yep.
leaving as soon as it gets 60 or below. But people think that, like, oh, how do you do it? You have two homes? Or why? I had a few rentals in Chicago, but it wasn't like I'm living there. It wasn't like a place that I can enjoy. So having also the residency and working towards the citizenship, it saves you in some taxes, depending on the
Yes.
country. I'm sure it's different people for different reasons on the tax saving part that you just explained. But for property taxes, which are the countries that you think that will be your favorite and the one not so good? Because when I hear people moving to Europe, I'm like, yes, low property taxes, but the price per square meter is pretty high in euros. And it depends, right? It all depends on the city. If it's a big city, small city. So what do do you have any favorites that you will be like, this country because of that?
Well, property taxes in Costa Rica were very low. Montenegro, extremely low. North America, the worst. Like, let's be honest, the taxes there are very, very high. And what you want to look at too is some places will have you don't pay an annual property tax, or if you do, it's quite small because you pay a tax when you purchase.
Mhm.
So it adds on, I mean, it can be tens of thousands of dollars. And people are like, whoa, I don't want to pay that tax, but they don't realize that they're not paying thousands of dollars every single year for their property tax. So it's more of a land transfer tax, but there isn't then annual property taxes. So you got to watch that a little bit in Europe. But I think when we look at markets, if we look more, I'll go with the developing. Those developing, like Montenegro, often when I mention Montenegro, I get a lot of people that say, Monaco? No, 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 no. Montenegro is not Monaco. It's like the opposite. And it's in the Balkans, and it's a very small country. The population of the entire country is roughly 650,000 people. That's it. Some people love that because there are towns, but when you get 50,000 people, that's the bigger town. I think the capital is, I'm not even sure if it's at 200,000 people. Maybe now because it is growing, it's booming. And so you need to think of that more of those lesser developed places, those taxes and things are going to be a lot lower. And your carrying costs, your HOA fees as we know it, or your condo fees, different names, same thing. Is there a requirement for house insurance? It
Mhm.
depends. Like North America, absolutely. Montenegro, no.
Yeah,
Costa Rica, I don't believe so. No, it's an option. It's available, but
yeah.
it's not a mandatory. And then utilities and things as well. What are those costs? I'm not sure what they are offhand within Costa Rica because it's been a while since I've lived there. But Montenegro is dirt cheap. Now, I don't have a huge place or anything like that, but I pay under €100 a month for my bills.
Mhm. That's really good.
Like even my internet. So I have this little kind of like a portable box type thing, and I put my SIM card in it, and I can connect up to 8 devices on it. It's only two. I've got my laptop, my iPad, and my phone. So three devices, and I pay €20 a month. So that's probably like 25 US dollars for all my internet all day. And it's not like, oh, you have a limit of so much. Like I am on it all the time. All my things are always connected. And so sometimes we look at that too. It's like, oh, well, if I'm here, my monthly expenses are less, my HOA fees are less, my property taxes. Maybe I'm paying more when I buy. Maybe it is a little bit more upfront depending upon the country, but it's less.
Yeah, sometimes we get stuck on these bills, at least in the US. And since we don't know any better, we're just like, think this is the way life is. And we're used to working like a horse to pay bills that are insane. And I put as always an example as Florida because the insurance went almost double on the property insurance because of the hurricanes and everything. But it's also the way they build. They build paper houses. Obviously, you need insurance because it's going to blow it away with the wind. So I always do compare the story, at least because we're next to Mexico and Florida are next to each other in the Caribbean area. The how houses are built. We have concrete over here, and although we have some concrete in Florida, it's mostly I feel like it's just sidewall. It's like, how do you build a house that is gonna get destroyed quickly just because you need
Yeah,
to?
with an average wood frame house like we built in Canada, they're wood framed homes. And that's another thing too for people to look at, like what kind of natural disasters happen in that. I'll use the word natural disasters, but are there tornadoes? Are there earthquakes? Are there hurricanes, typhoons? What things? And so what people can do too is look back at history, right? Like how often have massive incidences happen and what type of damage was done, how many things were done. Because when I was in Costa Rica, I was there for maybe a year, I think. And I mean, I'm from Calgary, Canada. We don't have earthquakes.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I'm up, I had a two-story house and I'm sitting and my room was swaying. Like I literally thought my house was going to fall over and I am WTF because what do I do? Like I've never been, and what do I do? And some tiles are falling off the wall, smashing on the floor. There's tiles off the roof because they're those red ones,
Yes,
smashing on the ground. And I'm just like, what do I do? Thankfully, it didn't last too long, but it was a 7.6.
that's
It
pretty.
was not a tiny earthquake, it was big. But thankfully, the structure of my house, I knew that they had earthquakes there. So we talked to the builder and he said he built it as if it was a 3-story home, but it's only two. The structure was good. And really, when the after effects, when we, would drive through town and things like that, and we heard for such a big earthquake, there was minimal damage done to stores, shops, buildings, because they know there's earthquakes.
Mhm.
They build them to make sure. And so that's something to consider if you're in an area and you're looking at real estate. And if it's known for flooding, is there a dip? Are you in a low part or is everything up on stilts? If hurricanes come through, what kind of construction is built? Has this area been totally wiped out 10 years ago and just newly built?
Mhm.
Are you okay with that or not? How is the new rebuild? Like those are things to consider for what people are looking for or where they are. Right now, I'm in Texas. No, I'm not in Texas anymore. I was. I'm in Nashville and I'm here for a couple of months. And I said,
Space. I'm like, where am I? I wake up.
I know sometimes I have to think, I forget sometimes. And I asked them, I'm like, do you guys have tornadoes here? And they said, well, yeah, I'm not usually right in Nashville, but sometimes. So I said, okay. I'm like, what do I do?
Yeah.
I've never been in a tornado, never near it, never anything. What do I do?
Yeah.
And so they said, well, if it happens, you should probably do this, this, this. And I'm like, okay, because then at least I know, right? It's being prepared. And so if you're going to be in a place they have earthquakes, make sure your house is built well. And it's an older home that I'm staying in. I mean, it's been through a lot. So I know structurally it's built well. And so that's things to take into consideration, not just, oh, I want sunshine and I want the beach and well, there's many things to think about because you want that place to still be standing
Yeah.
as more of these storms become worse and worse or more often. You want to make sure that you have quality built as well and not just something that's thrown up quick and cheap, and hopefully it withstands.
Totally agree with that. And I think I have a lot of examples of that, how sometimes we don't take that into consideration. And that's a very good valid point because, yeah, it's a beautiful place, but it's wait for the season. We know in the Caribbean, there are hurricanes. We just had one in Merida in Mexico over there. We barely missed it. But at that point, everybody was thinking about, should I get home insurance? And then the insurance broker that I was talking to, they're like, we have insurance that is open from this day to this day. After that, we'll insure anybody else for hurricane because everybody's thinking about that in hurricanes. So I was cracking up because I was like, that makes sense. Because now that we were trying to think about that, we're like, no, we're not offering the insurance right now until October. And we're like,
Mm.
okay, now we have to think ahead because sometimes we just don't. Those are fun facts. And I feel like now with what you were saying more than before, not only is it like a asset, diversification, we also have the passport diversification because I feel like a passport is not like an asset. You want to keep a few of them in your pocket, and it's like
Mhm.
a trend. So have you seen any passports that are more sought after than others? Which ones you will recommend somebody from the US that wants to at least get a summer home, but without going through such a long process that citizenship can be?
Yeah, so I think then it depends. Again, it's what is your plan? Do you want one now because you just want to have one now? Then go to the Caribbean, make a don't you don't even have to physically go there, but go with one of the Caribbean ones. If you can afford, you make the donation, 100 or sorry, 200,000, and it depends if you have kids and family, it could be a little bit more, and you can have one in 6 months. But for people who maybe don't want to spend that money or don't have it, the next best option would be, and not necessarily the quickest, depending upon the country, but where were your parents born?
Mhm.
And in some cases, grandparents, because some countries will go back to parents and grandparents, but then that's still going to take some time because we got to get the documents and everything else. So that would be an option. And then the one generally that's the longest is to naturalize. And that can be anywhere. If you get married, 2 to 3 years. It's never right away because they know that people just get married for passport purposes.
Yeah.
But to naturalize and live somewhere, you're looking at least 5 years in some countries, up to 10 years in other countries. And you need to be careful with that because some will say, oh, yeah, you need to be here 5 years, but that's assuming you're there full time for 5 years. If
Yeah.
you're gone 3 months out of the year, they actually figure out what 5 years is times the number of days per year. You need to be there that many days. So if you're gone 3 months a year, you're going to have to be in actually it'll be 6 years or maybe even 7 years, depending upon how much you travel, because even though they use years, it's a number of days. Or you can come and go all you want the first couple years, but then the last 2 years, you have to be at least 9 months per year in the country for the final 2 years. And so there's a lot of different rules around it. So again, it comes down to what is going to work for the individual. But having that, I mean, a second passport it's really, to me, it's really, really important because if for some reason the government decides they don't want to renew your passport for you protested, you donated to a protest, identity theft.
Mhm.
There was identity, and you need to go through court to prove that it wasn't you who did these things. And who knows how long that could take. Then at least you have another passport that you can travel with, go to. You don't like what the government's doing in one country, you can be like, I'm out. I'm
Mhm.
going to move to this other country. I can live there. I can work there. I can do what I want. And I can go back if things get better. So, with those citizenships, other than the ones with the naturalization that you must live there for so long, once you get the citizenship, you don't have to stay.
Mhm.
You can come and go as much as you want. And so that's why those are good. Residencies are quite good as well.
Mhm.
They will help where you can travel in and out. It's not the same as a passport that you can use as a travel document, but you can still, if you have your citizenship and passport and residency, you can use that passport to go to the other country where you have residency, and you can still stay there and live there as long as you want. Depending upon the type of residency, you can work and be there. So residency is still also really good, but citizenship is just that little bit better, but it is harder and takes longer or costs more.
So they have to decide whether they want to go the money route or the time route.
Yeah, that's like in everything. It's
Okay.
time or money. Nothing is like cheap and inexpensive. It's one
100.
or the other. And time wise, it's either you can't have expensive and quick is one, but you can't have cheap and quick.
Mhm.
It just, for
But
some reason, yeah, it's a balance. So what works? And that's why people really should think about what they want and start that now, because the way the rules are now, those rules can change to get the citizenship, to get the residency.
especially now that Americans are living faster in the US than other nationalities, because, it's a little chaotic here. And without any judgment of politics, it's just a little difficult to live here now compared to what it used to be 20 years ago. Keep that into consideration for a plan B. It's always better to have the plan B than none and get stuck in a situation that you don't want to be at.
Right. And with that plan, it doesn't mean that you have to. Like if
Mhm.
you start applying for citizenship other than naturalization, but if you can apply through your family, you don't ever have to go there. So a friend of mine, she's Polish. She's applying for her Polish citizenship. She's like, I don't want to live in Poland. But you don't have to.
Mhm.
You're Polish. You were born there. Like you have a right. You and because she was born there, moved to Canada when she was little. Get that passport, and that opens up the entire European Union. But you don't have to live there. So even for people who have their parents, they could get that citizenship from Poland, Italy, wherever it may be, doesn't mean they necessarily have to live there, and they don't even have to go there.
Mhm.
But it's a passport that can be used for travel or for the entire European Union if things are not good. And good is
But
whatever you determine. It's perspective.
mhm,
It's perspective, and make that decision. But it gives options.
100%.
It's what it is. It's having options.
My portfolio is growing. I'm on the third passport, one residency. So I'm gonna hopefully get four passports. My fourth one will be Mexico, hopefully. And we save in property taxes if you're a citizen. So I'm excited about it.
Perfect. An extra benefit.
Yeah.
Other benefits too with that is like through the real estate, but then also with some countries investing, right?
Mhm.
And investing in stocks and different options. When you have real estate, or real estate can allow you to get residency, which can lead to citizenship too. Some you have to have the residency first, some you can get the real estate first. And so it they coincide, but it's kind of, as you said earlier, that chicken and the egg. Which one do you have to do first? Depends on the country that you're looking at.
Mhm. Awesome. We have one last question because I'm curious.
Okay.
I know we cannot predict the future, but I think, what do you think, from your perspective, are the trends for coming out for the future that people are not considering, or we should follow? Probably we're like blinded by something we don't know. We don't know. We don't know. So, what's your future of global real estate? What do you think? What are the countries that are trending for you?
Well, I think we're blinded by mainstream media. Uh, I don't watch any of it because I just don't think it's accurate. I think we honestly, the trends are going to go up. More people are moving around. People generally want more safety, more security, and their money to go further. Even people who are wealthy, like they don't want to waste money. They want their money to go further. So when we look at those things and the ability of people to work online, remote workers, digital nomads, whatever wordage that people want to use, more and more people are becoming that way. And with AI, it's becoming more and more. So I think where people really should look, and it will make most people uncomfortable, is emerging markets. Like not North America, not Australia, not New Zealand, not the UK, not most of Europe, of the kind of like Western Europe. Sure, in parts of Spain, but there's pros and cons to there. But I'm thinking more of places of Turkey, Montenegro, Serbia, kind of that Balkan area, and then into Asia. There's still parts that are very expensive. Like Thailand is quite expensive right now, but if we look at Malaysia, Malaysia's getting more. They've changed their whole program. It's costing more. But though there are those emerging markets now, you want to be careful with real estate, like the weather, the build of the construction, all the things that we talked about. Again, then you're very far from your home country, if that matters to you. For some people it does, some people it doesn't. Mexico is great, and potentially also going south, Paraguay has really potential long term, but it's landlocked. Not everybody likes that. Uruguay is another good option, I think, potentially. It's not landlocked, but it's still far. Like the Americas is pretty big. Like
Yeah.
you're flying far still. So to take those, but I think we need to look at more of the emerging places that people don't really look at. You're going to get more bang for your buck, and then you have to think, what is the lifestyle you want?
Hmm. Yeah. I think everything boils down to that. Where do I see myself in 5 years, or how long I want my retirement money to last? Too
Hmm. Yeah,
awesome.
and what do I want? Do I want to be around, what kind of weather do I want? Right? What kind of activities, outdoor stuff, hobbies, things do you do? Do you want to have a big yard and have your own garden in your yard because that's what you like to do? Do you want to be in the city, but it's going to be walkable, so you walk everywhere and you're near shops and stores, or it's thinking of those things. But I think the ability to potentially grow some of our own food would be a benefit in the future. We'll kind of see how, because we're seeing how things go. But even if it's only a few things, we can always trade. Like if you have an apple tree, you're not going to eat all the apples of the apple tree. And in a tropical place, you have apples, mangoes, a couple things. You can trade those things with your neighbors.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to have a big yard to have some vegetables and fruits. And yes, those things are seasonable. You can have herbs in your house with sunshine. And those are very simple things I think, to take into consideration, especially if we're looking at that we work from home or retirement, we have that extra time. And we do have that generally when we move,
Mhm.
because in North America, we're so busy, go, 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 drive everywhere, drive here, drive there. that we kind of forget about those things. But when you have more time because you work from home, you have great weather, even a small yard or a terrace that you can have potted things on, those things are nice to do. Obviously, I enjoy doing those things, but I think those are other things to consider as well, especially if we think of the environment and how storms are getting worse and things are getting damaged. What types of crops or fruits and vegetables or things can we have for ourselves? And they're just better. It's way better when we grow it at home.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think this is a trend, and more people like their food naturally sourced instead of big stores. And during the pandemic, when we ran out of a lot of things, that's when we started thinking, oh, food supply, maybe it's an issue. Maybe might be in the future that we need to take that into consideration instead of being in a big city, which is awesome. But, what's the upside? What's the downside?
Exactly. I always say everything is a double-edged sword.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If you're city center, I love being close because I love walking everywhere, but then it's finding some place that will have a terrace or a patio where I can at least have some fresh herbs or like little things that I can grow. And sure, it's not going to be a lot, but it's just me. So I don't need a lot. And finding that balance, or for those who don't want to be in the city, right? Maybe you want to be close, you don't want to drive far, but you can be just outside. You can get a small piece of land with a home, do what you want with it, live a relaxed life, still work from home. And I think even though we're seeing some immigration go into North America from other countries, I see a lot of emigration from North America going to more to the developing countries because we've lived the hustle. We've lived it, and a lot of people are tired of it. They don't want it. They think there's more to life than work, 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 and pay more, pay more, pay more. And they want more relaxing, more part of community. When we look at blue zones, one of the biggest thing with blue zone is healthy eating and community. And a lot of people in big cities, even though they're in a big city, they don't have community. They got a lot of people around. There's a lot of people around, but there's not that sense of community where they can phone. Like I remember growing up, I would be like, hey, can you go across the street? And they say if they have a cup of sugar, we can borrow. Right. And you get like now you go across the like,
don't send your child across the street.
don't do it. Right. And it in part is because of time, but there's still places in the world where that happens. Where you can just go and ask your neighbor for something, or you go over and you need a hand, you help each other out in that community. And without really getting into it, and science and studies have shown that's when people are lacking, that causes all kinds of health problems and depression and sadness and everything like that. So moving to a place where our money goes further, we enjoy it better, we have a sense of community, and making sure though that the real estate that we buy is for what we want for the long-term plan. And personally, I think if you're not going to be somewhere for at least 5 years, generally speaking, it's not worth buying.
Mm-hmm.
And there's exceptions to that, but we have to think of like, because you're paying your taxes to purchase, land title, all of those things. And then if you sell, you got to pay the realtor, other things again. And so you need to consider, sure, some markets hit it and that's great, but think of that plan of what is it for, or that I'm going to be here for just a few years and then I'm going to rent.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to go, and maybe that's what they do. They go somewhere for a few years, then rent it out, buy somewhere else in a few years, somewhere else, then rent it and do it that way. That's an option too.
Yeah, no, I love it. The digital nomad.
There's so many options.
Yes. So thank you so much for all your time. And I love the lifestyle that you live. I feel like that's why we connected so well. And hey, we're on the same page. We want to inspire people to do similar things that it works for us. We cannot influence everybody, but at least get inspired by, it's possible. And
Absolutely.
too. Awesome. I know that you have also a podcast, which is called The Global Citizen Life. So people can find you there. Any other social media that you like to share?
I'm pretty much all over it, but the names are always a little bit different. So it's Global Citizen Life or The Global Citizen Life Consultant.
Okay.
Sometimes I had to add that. But if they go to the website, globalcitizenlife.org, then everything is on there. Social media stuff is on there. They can find everything from there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sally. And I'm sure we'll be connecting with more viewers about this topic. And thanks for being our first guest in our podcast.
Thank you.
I'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us on the Real Estate Investment Nomad podcast. I hope today's episode has inspired you to explore new horizons in global real estate. Remember, the world is full of opportunities waiting to be discovered. And with the right insights, you can turn those opportunities into successful investments. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback helps us bring you the best content possible. Don't forget to follow us in social media for more resources and updates. Until next time, my friends, this is Nathaly Salas, encouraging you to think big, invest globally, and transform your real estate journey. Safe travels and happy investing.